So I saw a thing on presentations once that said, don't tell them what you've accomplished because that makes you sound arrogant. Tell them what you've learned. I have a lot more things that I learned on this than what I've accomplished so far, so that's going to be easy. And what I wanted to show you today is I did some work with quizzes in Fine 274, which is a drawing course that I teach in fine arts. It'll make an interesting comparison and contrast with Prabhakar's experiences in CS 145. And I've used quizzes extensively in a previous version of this course on ACE. So this is a quiz I've worked with before. I was very familiar with the content and how I wanted to go at it. And when I look back at the excitement that Scott and I have shared this term over quizzes in Fine 274, I think that there are a few key conceptual leaps I failed to make. I'm one of the robust instructors. I started with this in the spring. I have found most of adjusting to D2L pretty smooth, pretty comfortable. I've been pretty happy with a lot of how it works. And even so, familiar quiz, familiar course content, a term's lead time getting into D2L. So there were about 3 major things that I did wrong that cost me a lot of time, that were based on me not using the same conceptual model of what was going on in D2L. And if I can pinpoint for you where I made those mistakes, I can save you so much time. So here is my what I did wrong and ugly consequences presentation about quizzes in D2L. I had 2 quizzes. The first, a lab readiness quiz. I'm about to take these students up to the human anatomy lab on the north part of campus, and they need some health and safety information. They need to know what the behavioral standards are in the lab. They need to know what gear to bring with them. And I've put that into a set of readings and then a self-quiz. And when you've done this quiz enough times that you get all of the answers right, you may come to the lab. Yeah, so submission views in this quiz don't do what I thought they did. I set the submission view wrong, and my 26 students took 892 attempts to get perfect scores on this 8-question quiz.
So they managed.
Yes. So Prabhakar's got 70 highly computer-friendly, math-adept students. I have 26 fine arts majors, and they need some sort of medal for what happened on this quiz, because what they got in feedback, yeah, okay. If I can't be a good example, I'll serve as a horrible warning. I don't want to shift this into presentation mode if I can avoid it, so let me just, page down is here somewhere. Thank you, new keyboard.
Or if you click on this, the next slide, I think.
The next,
Right, if you click over there.
yeah, let's just do that. Okay, there's the entire extent of the feedback they'd get after submitting their quiz. I actually spent hours for every wrong answer on this multiple choice and multiple select quiz, writing a chatty, friendly, oh, interesting that you made that mistake. What you really should have thought about is this feedback, so that when they blew it, they would go back in, and the next time they get it right, and they saw none of that because I selected the wrong submission view. So all they got, bless their valiant little hearts, was how many out of 8 questions they got right. Now, by the time I knew this was a problem, there were students in the classroom swapping notes with one another on how to game a multiple choice test. And bless them, but this is not in the skill set of fine arts majors. I hope and pray your students would have sorted this out on a Saturday, have swapped email in the forum or whatever about it by Sunday, and everybody would have figured out. Submit question 1 with notes about what answers you submitted, get it back. That was wrong, try a different set of answers. That's what they ended up having to do for the entire quiz. And we're still speaking. My mistake. Now, this part is not as much my mistake, because the other conceptual difference between what I was expecting the quiz to do and what D2L was expecting the quiz to do, I did, as I promised, write them feedback. What should you wear in the anatomy lab? Flip-flops. No, you should not wear flip-flops in the anatomy lab. So I've written a piece of feedback that they should get on that. The only way they see that after they've submitted it is if they unhide the feedback at the bottom of the question, and then they get these down here, not only separate from the incorrect answers that they gave, but not identified in any way with the incorrect answers that they gave. That's not enough for that's certainly not what I was trying to do, so I spent a lot of time that was not useful to them or to me. But that's a difference you need to know going in if you want to use feedback for this, is to see what it actually looks like when they get it. One of the other functions that this quiz is supposed to serve is getting them used to how to write a quiz in ACE, because they have an online midterm on anatomy vocabulary later in the term. And what I managed to do was create a huge sense of dread instead of easing them into using the tool. They must have really wanted a chance to draw in the lab that they stuck with me after this. The second interesting challenge or mistake that I made is an important conceptual difference with D2L. You can build the questions for the quiz. This was for the anatomy midterm that I had them write. You can build those questions as you go in the quiz itself. Absolutely fine. They say somewhere we'd prefer you did this in the question library, but you can do it in the quiz, which means you won't know right up until you try to implement random sections that you can't do that from the quiz. Those questions have to be in the library. That cost me a ton of time, and it was entirely based on me not having the same conceptual model. I'll show you in a second the screenshots that set that up. Then I misunderstood their model for how weighting of the questions works, which cost me a mountain of time regrading a quiz. So if I can save you that pain, here's what that pain looked like. All right, so here's the kind of thing that I wanted to be able to do on the quiz that I had done on a version of this quiz on ACE. I've got 5 different photographs of ears with jewelry to say which part of the ear is pierced, to get an anatomical answer about the different anatomical features of the pinna or the external ear, if you care. That's lovely, and I want to be able to randomly select one of those for each student's quiz so that academic integrity is preserved and everybody gets to have an adventure, and I don't have to pick my favorite external feature of the ear. But those questions have to be available in the question library for me to be able to set up what's called a random section, a question that chooses randomly one of the 5 possible questions. I can set those 5 questions up separately in the quiz, but if they're not in the library, I can't create a random section with them. That's the extent of my teaching to you about it. Mostly, I just want to post a warning flag about the fact that you can build these questions in the quiz, and eventually it will save them for you to the library or ask you if you want to save them to the library. But if they're not in the library, when you want to build, choose one of these for my quiz, you can't do it. And that was time consuming. I really want to. The weighting is the thing that I failed badly on. Badly, badly, badly. So here's a look at the pinna questions as they show up in the question library. So I've gotten past that hurdle, and now I have my 5 different possible pinna questions in the library to choose from. When you look at this, there are points per question and difficulty levels. I didn't do anything with difficulty levels, but this is where they first show up. How do you edit those? Just as a pop quiz, looking at this, because I failed this pop quiz. I failed this in a way that cost me regrading every question individually. Found it yet? Over here in this set of icons is one that I don't remember seeing anywhere else in D2L at all. That little one that looks like a set of balances. That's weighting. Get it? Okay, so if you click on that, you're going to be able to edit the weighting of the questions in the question library. That's me attempting telepathy as another teaching strategy. Because once you do that, it opens up an individual question, and suddenly now I have an ability to enter points and choose a difficulty level for that question in the question library. Prabhakar.
Is the edit icon a little pencil?
Yes. And so, if we go back and look at this, there's the little edit pencil icon for the question. That's going to let me edit the question. It doesn't open up these for editing. I clicked the pencil many, many times. I was really good at this, I swear. I thought I was the sort of person who was really good at this until 2 months ago. Yes?
What is the difficulty setting?
They have several different dimensions on which you can weight a question. So how many points do you want it to be worth? How difficult is it, in case you want to use that as a multiplier of some kind? So this is a 5. Levels of difficulty, like in diving.
Diving, yeah. Right.
Yes. And that's slightly different from weighting.
But is that something you can then combine if I want to take a random set of questions and I want the sum of the difficulties to be 30 or something like that?
I believe so, and there are people in my peripheral vision nodding heavily. It's really important that I stay at the limits of what I know to be true, but that's got to be what those sorts of tools are for. I didn't touch difficulty. I caused more than enough firestorms with the things that I did touch.
Just one comment. I don't know that you would be able to sum to a particular difficulty, but I think you would be able to choose some number of questions of a given difficulty level. So if you had questions of difficulty level 1 and difficulty level 5, you could say, give me, one question of difficulty 1 and 2 questions of difficulty 5. Yeah.
Okay, there are several places in D2L's conceptual model about weighting of questions. There are several places where you can change the weighting. The question library, so you can change kind of the base weighting of this question in the library. But then you can tweak it locally within a quiz. So it comes in with whatever you assigned it in the library, but you can tweak it locally, fine-tune it for the quiz itself, which starts to look like this. So here's how you change the values locally within the quiz. When you get into the quiz and you are looking at layout questions, you can add and edit questions. That little button there is the one where you can make up questions in the quiz, the ones that you can't then put in a random section without having put them in the library and brought them back. But you can specifically grab questions and edit values. And that's going to give us a shot again at points and difficulty, but local to that quiz. And then you can also change the value. Here's what those pin questions look like when I want to choose 1 from 5 in a random question or random section. And that you also have the ability to change the points assignment on locally. And looking within that random section at my pin aparts questions, here are all of them. I can also say here how many points each. So it's going to pick one of these 5 questions. How many points does each of those get? Or it's going to pick 3 of these 5 questions. How many points does each of those get? So there are a few different places where you can tweak these weightings and values. And that's where the points happens here. Difficulty is still hanging out over in this part of the menu. Points are now there locally within the quiz. Okay. What that looks like when things go horribly wrong. So here's my quiz. It's beautiful. Start the quiz. I'm okay with whatever that's saying. So pick a bunch of things. Lovely. Next page. Matching photos to anatomical names. Lovely. I don't know how next page ended up here. That's new. I do this in Firefox, and my version of Firefox is too recent. Let me say that's an absolute no-no, and talk to me later about how much of a no-no it is. But don't grade in Firefox in too advanced a level. The cursor goes backwards. I am not making this up. Type 85 and wait and see how long it takes for that student to get in touch with you about their 58. I believe Scott awarded me a prize as the queen of weird bugs for that one. Okay, so here's a fill in the blanks question that I was really, really proud of. That's great, it's lovely, and I thought I finally got a way to auto grade instead of me having to go through and check everybody's paper for quadriceps femoris. Lovely. Partway through, while they were writing this, I gave them during this calendar day, take any 3-hour window, write this, we're fine. And partway through, I discovered that someone had entered, I don't know, quadriceps femoris spelled a different way. And in a spirit of generosity, I went in and edited the quiz while they were still using it to add that as another possible correct answer. So, going to this quiz now, grading, let's go look by question at what I saw when I went to look at my beautiful question with the fill in the blanks. 26 students have completed this. No attempts have been completed. I had a heart attack. Scott, fortunately, is accomplished at CPR. So when we go by question, that's all beautiful. There are all my questions, including for something like PINA, just because we keep talking about PINA, it grades each of the 5 possible randomly chosen ones separately. That's lovely. More questions, more questions, more questions. And here are all of the attempts at questions from previous versions of the quiz. So this is where all of the attempts from a previous version that students did went. Here's what grading looks like on one where they've actually done it. I share that with you, but now I'll switch to screen captures because I have fewer flashbacks. So I changed the question partway through. I cannot stress highly enough how much I beg you not to do that. Mountains and mountains of manual grading and regrading. But I used some long answer questions, and I liked that much better than fill in the blanks. It seemed like fill in the blanks was going to save me a lot of work by being auto-gradable, and I don't think that it did. I'm going to show you what that looked like in case it's better suited for your type of questions in your subject area, but it was a nightmare for me. So long answer questions look like this when you come to grade them. You've given them a field of a length you specified to fill in. In my case, I don't know, it was 3 answers, things that, landmarks that are pretty much visible no matter how much somebody weighs. And you can leave some notes for yourself or the TA who's marking as an answer key saying, here's the kind of stuff that'll do. And I thought, oh, how tiresome, I'm going to have to go through and mark those. This was blindingly fast to mark. Long answer was fine compared to what happened on the fill in the blanks. Because there's no way to give enough possible spellings of quadriceps femoris to account for what happens when 26 fine art students attempt to spell. So it can be auto-graded if and only if you really can provide all possible acceptable answers, and there's a silly bit of arithmetic that you also have to do. On the way, I don't know why it offers spell check with fill-in-the-blanks questions, but you need to decide if that bothers you. I don't know anybody whether you can turn off access to spell check, but there's a spell check at each one of those blanks. Spell check doesn't do you a lot of good, as you can see. Spell check can't spell quadriceps femoris either. But when I'm building those fill-in-the-blanks questions, that one in particular that had 6 blanks in it, weighting comes back to haunt me again. Because now, here's the first of 6 blanks. Here was every spelling I could come up with that they might legitimately enter for quads or quadriceps femoris or whatever. And at least one that is why I added it after they started the quiz. Shoot me now. But you also need to enter a weight for each of those answers, which is out of the 6 possible blanks I'm having them fill in, how much is this blank worth? This blank is worth 1 out of 6 in my grading scheme, which is 0.166666666, etc. That needs to be entered individually for each of these possible answers. That's an exciting possible feature. Perhaps you want quads to be worth less than quadriceps femoris spelled correctly, but it means you have to enter that weight every single time and have done the arithmetic to do it. The savings of having this auto-graded was just hugely not worth it to me. Massive pain in the ass. Auto-grading looks like this. It's lovely. It works. Auto-graded, multiple choice. It said, yep, we've randomized them and so on, and yet I didn't even put an answer in for this when I was showing you. Works out the score. But because I had the weightings wrong, I also can tell you that regrading this manually, there's a way to do it for you to go through and check either to plow through all the students' answers or to go in, if a student's got a query about their midterm and a question in particular, to go in and regrade it is really easy. I can just go in there and change that 0 to whatever I think they deserved. And it will say ever after that it's been graded by me and has a tag on it saying that I did that, which is lovely and 2 slides from finished. So this is what the grading on the fill-in-the-blanks looks like, and it took ages, and it's my fault. Sidebar, ignore this if you're not into bugs, but these, for some reason, showed up in different orders for different students as I was grading. I have no clue. At that point, I wasn't interested in diagnosing that so much as trying to get on track. So the grading gives you red X's and green check marks, and this is what it looks like when you've gone in and regraded it. It has a little note saying, I've done that, which I had to do since a lot of my students were getting 0.1 on questions for which they had earned 1, and that really messed up the scoring. Long answer looks like this, so easy. So their answer comes up here. I skim this if I haven't got my content memorized, which of course we all do, and I throw in a 2 and we're done. That went blindingly fast. I love long answer questions, and I hope that fill-in-the-blanks questions burn in hell forever and ever and ever. So submission views don't mean what you think they mean, and I'm not here to teach you how they work, and I would hesitate to say that I get it yet, but that's a big possible landmine. How feedback that you've written for the students is delivered to them, comes back, possible landmine, check and see that you understand it. Don't change the quiz halfway through, mountain of grading coming downstream, and look really hard at how the grading works for the different formats of questions you're using to see whether the trade-off on how easy it is to set the questions up is worth what it's going to take to grade them or auto-grade them or regrade them at the other end. Because I only have to set that question up once. I have to grade it 26 times and again and again. That's all my pain. Do you have any questions that could rub salt in the wounds before I go?
I feel like I should give you a big hug or something. Would you like a cookie? We have cookies going around the room. We have to make sure
Thank
they
you.
get circulated. Oh.
Thank you.
Yeah, so any questions for Linda?
Yes?
This isn't a question, it's sort of a distant virtual hug, but I'm robust too, and I've never had any problem with learning management software before I worked on Learn this term. And two of the problems you identified were two huge problems for me too, so it's not just you, even though strictly speaking, at least one of them was our errors. I also screwed up letting the students see the feedback, so I also had students doing quizzes a million times in order to get the score that was necessary as a gateway, and I thought I had said it right. Eventually I discovered that I had said it wrong, but it wasn't obvious to begin with. And I also couldn't figure out how to randomize the questions for my quiz, which was a huge problem in a last minute panic, and it wasn't at all intuitive. I don't find the system at all intuitive.
Yep. The things that I screwed up that I think are intuitive, and it was my own fool fault, I didn't even bother sharing with you. But these are some where it's a conceptual shift, and it may be even more the case if you spend some time in ACE that you're predisposed to certain models and the model shifted, and it could cost you a lot of time. Yep.
Will you ever use the ACE or Learn for quizzes again?
Oh, absolutely. I'm invested in it now. I know how this works. This is not a sunk cost. That's not that fallacy. This is really, I fixed these 3 or 4 things this month so that next fall when I come back into that course, I've got it really, really ready to roll, and the investment is really worthwhile.
So what's the workaround that you're going to use for the fill in the blanks? You're just going to mark them yourself?
I'm going to do them as long answer and mark them myself, because it really is faster for me to look at a glance and say, yeah, that's approximately quadriceps.
Yeah.